What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/MilitaryStories. This story is called My Father, a 22-year-old U.S. Air Force bombardier, survived being shot down, held as a Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party prisoner of war, and escaped via a series of remarkable events. He did not tell his story until 1996. This is a transcript of his dictated account, posted in sections. Long title, okay. To my knowledge, this is the first time it's been shared publicly. I will add brief context clearly marked as my own commentary. Otherwise, these are his words. Please excuse the disjointed flow, since the sub requires text only and not attachments, and I'm on mobile. Prologue and context. He met his sweetheart when they were both age 5, so 1928 Cicero, Illinois. He kissed her on the cheek. They remained smitten school children from that point on. They both came from unspeakably cruel households. They protected one another and were rarely seen apart. They put themselves and one another through college and married. A child was on the way as he deployed. They had long been a family to one another, aspiring to a peaceful, simple life far from the violence and poverty they were raised on. Everything he had hoped to achieve, the extent of his dreams, was to complete service to his country and return to his bride, perhaps in time for the arrival of the baby. He hadn't thought past that and didn't need to. And there's a voice recording from First Lieutenant Thomas F. Brown Jr. as transcribed by Helen Brown, March 25th, 1995. Part 1.
I have a story to tell. It's as old as the hills, but oh well. It has one twist that might interest you. Skies of gray, they turn to blue. It has happened to me and to you. On March 26, 1995, will be the 50th anniversary of a momentous day in our family history. The day that I hope will live in our collective memories as long as we are bound or abide. March 25th, 1945. General Willie Black and I returned to our squadron from an R&R trip to Rome. You see, for every 5 missions that we successfully completed, we were given a pass for some rest and relaxation in a selected place. After 5 missions, we got to go to Bari, Italy. After 10, we went to Naples. And while at Naples, we visited not only Pompeii, but we went to the Isle of Capri. Truly one of the most beautiful places I have ever been. But that's another story. I returned to find our airplane commander and pilot, Captain Walter Stevens, in a high state of exultation. We hadn't flown a mission since March 15th, and between March 15th and the 25th, when we got back from Rome, Captain Stevens had used his time to put forth his case that we should lead the 55th Wing of the 15th Air Force on its next mission. He was consumed with the desire to be promoted to major. He had come through 4-engine, multiple-engine pilot training as a captain. I think he was a pilot even before the war, and I seem to recall the insignia on his collar the first time I saw him was that of an artilleryman. I suspect he was an artilleryman in the Texas National Guard or whatever, and when the war came, he was called to active service and went to pilot school. Anyhow, he went through training as a captain, and his overriding desire was to be promoted to major. So he was always putting himself forward and his crew. And indeed, he was successful in getting us to fly the lead position on our squadron and the 55th Wing of the 15th Air Force on Monday, March 26th. You know how I hate to be rushed about anything. I still hate to be rushed, and we had just gotten back, and I was ready to rest a little bit, but that was not to be. So between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday, March 26, 1945, we were awakened by the officer of the day, or one of his minions whose job it was to wake up the air crews that were going to fly. We were supposed to wake up and get dressed and get ready and go eat breakfast at the officer's mess at around 5 o'clock. And I must say that the air crews who were flying that day got the best of any food that was available. We had, if there were any, fresh eggs served to the combat crews flying that day. Sometimes they were scrambled, sometimes they were powdered. We called them prefab eggs. We always had the little Vienna sausages. Sometimes we had bacon, and we always had homemade bread toasted. The eating at 5 o'clock in the morning was difficult, because one's heart was in one's throat with worry and concern about what the day would bring. I do recall having some coffee and some toast and some kind of grape jelly. I remember picking at some scrambled eggs and eating a Vienna sausage or something, maybe a piece of bacon, and that was it. We were to have some breakfast and get shaved and whatever we were going to do. Go to the the latrine, which was right outside of our living quarters, close by, and then we were due at briefing at 6 o'clock. Briefing is that part of mission planning where the intelligence staff tells you what the name of your target is, how you will be going there, what your scheduled route is, what time you'll rendezvous with the other squadrons that will fly the mission with you, at what altitude you will fly, the course you will follow, and what one might expect in the way of either threats from German fighters or from anti-aircraft batteries. The intelligence people were frequently wrong. You know, they had maps of everything, and we were always given maps and where our target was located, and any aerial photographs that they had that would help us identify the target we were assigned. But their information on fighter protection and anti-aircraft batteries was frequently faulty, at least so it seemed to combat crews. Our target that day was the railroad marshalling yards in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. Bratislava, Czechoslovakia was not supposed to be particularly heavily defended. Its anti-aircraft batteries were not known for their accuracy, nor for their number. German fighter planes, as the war dragged on, were less and less of a threat. Because so many had lost in combat previously, they did not mount massive formations of fighters to attack bomber squadrons in groups as they did earlier in the war. Their practice was, since they had fewer numbers, the practice was to pick off stragglers after a bombing mission was completed and the injured ships and people were on their way home. All in all, Bratislava was supposed to be a comparatively easy target. Since we were the lead ship in our group and wing, we were given additional information, additional maps and charts, additional information about alternates in case, for some reason, we could not hit our primary target. But I recall we were not particularly concerned because at a weakly defended target, the lead ship in the formation was the best place to be because the anti-aircraft gunner sighted in lead, so to speak, sighted on the lead ships in the formation and fired off their anti-aircraft shells with the hope that if they didn't hit the lead ship, they would at least hit the ships behind them. There was only one problem with our proposed flight that day, and that was our course. We were required to fly towards the target, flying over Yugoslavia and Hungary, which, by the time this was in, Yugoslavia, of course, wasn't in Russian hands at the time, but Hungary was, and then we would fly. After we bombed the target, we were to return over enemy territory, that is, over Austria, and then Yugoslavia, and then across the Adriatic, and back home. This seemed to us to be less than desirable. But hey, we had to do what they told us to do, right? Besides, I was young then and I did what I was told to do. I realize that this narrative so far does not sound like, nor will it read, like high adventure and action-packed drama. I think it is necessary to relate the ordinariness that sets into military life. No pep talks, no off we go into the wild blue yonder stuff. No, go get 'em, guys. It was not the spirit of the locker room for athletic contests. Briefing sessions were informational, and the ordinary demeanor of the flight crews was quiet, thoughtful, attentive, trying to deal with our own doubts and concerns and fears, meanwhile absorbing the information that was being given us so that we could do our job for the day. After the briefing was completed, the chaplain came on and led the air crews in prayer, which was always well attended. And we prayed hard that day. And we did every day, really. After the chaplain, the lead crew and our deputy lead were called aside for additional preparations. We learned that because we were the lead crew, we would have more than just our usual crew on board. And I should take the time to tell you who they were. Our flight engineer was George Larson, out of Detroit, Michigan, Waist Gunner Elmer Buffo, out of Pittsburgh, Waist Gunner Bill Skinner from Oklahoma, Waist Skinner or Top Turret Gunner Truman Fuller out of the Deep South, and Ball Turret Gunner and Radioman Talmadge P. Callison, also a good old Southern boy. Captain Steves, that I previously mentioned, was our pilot, and flying co-pilot that day, we had a major by the name of Wilson. Sorry, I don't know his first name. We had never seen him before. He was obviously visiting the squadron and flying that day because it was supposed to be an easy mission. Navigators were General Willie Black, who was going to be a nose turret operator that day, in addition to being navigator. We also had an additional navigator in the nose, Robert Johnson from Ohio, and a radio navigator also named Wilson, who was also flying his last mission and would be going home when we were finished, and he was coming along. Also because it was supposed to be an easy mission. There were 11 of us in all. Of course, I was flying in my usual position as bombardier.
Alright, well that's all they have posted for now, and I'm really curious as to how it unfolds because these old World War II stories can be pretty freaking crazy. Alright, this story's called No, Ruckle! Bad boy! So, as anyone who has served in the military knows, on most military installations, families of service members often live on post with them. They are often called dependents. These wonderful people can be spouses, children, and other family members that live with the soldier, marine, sailor, or airman. Often these family members work on post as office staff, in the PX, or even at one of the number of restaurants, fast food joints that dot the post landscape. So there was a young lady who happened to work at a fast food joint on post. She was a young Latina girl who was the niece of a staff sergeant who works in supply, or the motor pool, I believe, and was living with his family on post. We will call him Staff Sergeant Uncle. Ruckle, ever the lover of anyone or anything female, decided to flirt with her and ask her out on a date. She, for reasons known only to the universe, says yes. Ruckle then goes to pick her up for their first date in his friend's car, which Ruckle isn't allowed to drive because he doesn't have a license, and is apparently not only told off by Staff Sergeant Uncle, but chewed out on the spot. You see, the girl was 16 years old, just turned 16 years old, and had a child that was less than a year old. So Ruckle, during his chewing out, was asked if he knew that she was 16 years old, to which Ruckle, being ever the aspiring secret squirrel, decided to lie and say that she told him she was 19. Enter the niece. She is honest and tells her uncle that she told him her age, and that Ruckle told her that it wasn't a problem with him. When the staff sergeant asked Ruckle about this, Ruckle again denied this, but upon further questioning, admitted that he did know she was 16. When Ruckle was asked to identify himself and his unit, Ruckle refused to do so. When the staff sergeant demanded Ruckle's ID, Ruckle reluctantly handed it over and then identified himself and once again embarrassed our unit. It is hard enough being an MP in the military, but having someone like Ruckle counted amongst your numbers doesn't help matters. Now, you are probably wondering how I know all this happened. Well, as you can imagine, Staff Sergeant Uncle didn't take to his soldiers trying to sleep with his underage niece too well. He contacted our unit and had a meeting with our first sergeant. Our first sergeant calls in our private, should be sergeant, Ruckle and Lieutenant Cruz, who was about a week from moving on to his next posting and away from Ruckle. At guard mount, the next duty shift, Ruckle is nowhere to be seen. However, during our briefing, we have an added bit of information given to us. We receive a special lecture about how soldiers are not to engage in any kind of relationships or sexual activities with minors. We are not told why, but the lack of Ruckle kind of gives us a clue. After the guard mount, we go to our vehicle and I am riding with Hightower, my favorite posting. He wants to find out what is going on, and we go back inside and he asks the lieutenant what is up with the briefing. There are two other NCOs, I can't remember who, also wanting to know what is up. Lieutenant Cruz states that he can't talk about it. That's when Hightower mutters the two words that haunted us all.
Frickin' Ruckle.
Lieutenant Cruz then tells us that what he is going to say cannot leave the room. With a look of utter exhaustion on his face, Lieutenant tells us about how Ruckle tried to date and most likely sleep with a minor who lived with her uncle on post. He then told us about the meeting with himself, Ruckle, the first sergeant, and Staff Sergeant Uncle. Staff Sergeant Uncle was livid during the entire meeting, but kept his bearing pretty well, we were told. Ruckle was like a kid who was caught with his hand in the underage cookie jar. Unfortunate phrasing there. He tried to deny that he knew the girl's actual age, but then fessed up to it. He kept swearing that he was not planning on having sex with her, that they were just going to go for a drive and get dinner. This brought up the fact that Ruckle was driving without a license. Ruckle had to tell them whose car it was and why he was driving. He apparently didn't want to look like a loser and borrowed a car from a friend, I don't know who. After the facts were discovered, Staff Sergeant Uncle left and the Lieutenant and First Sergeant had their turn to chew out Ruckle. Ruckle was relieved of duty and assigned to sandbag filling duty for 3 weeks, 12 hours a day with no days off. We had a 3-week vacation from Ruckle, but I still fear for what would have happened if he would have gone on that date with her. Ruckle is not the kind of guy who takes young ladies out to dinner and for a nice drive. If it were up to me, he'd have his junk beat with rubber hoses for a few hours every day for a month. To the best of my knowledge, he never tried to date a dependent again, no matter their age. Though his story has a happy ending, it does show Ruckle has worse judgment-making skills than any of the other stories I have shared. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know which one you would like to read next. I can post either the poker game, the night I watched Ruckle use his moves at a diner, or how Ruckle got Chipmunk his name. Okay, I don't normally do this, but the comments are kind of funny. This guy's like, "Freaking Ruckle! Not only was she a staff sergeant's niece, she was a minor?" And then OP says, "If you put him in a room with 3 bowling balls and leave for 5 minutes, when you return, 1 will be missing, 1 will be broken, and the last one will be pregnant." Unfortunately, Ruckle's stupidity just barely misses the mark of charming stupidity by like 5.5 miles. And yeah, he needs some help. That's disgusting behavior, man. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.